The space around Centauri Station burned with the light of dying ships. Captain Jiwan gripped her command chair as another explosion rocked the bridge of the Stellar Dawn. Through the main view screen, she watched the last of the Coalition's defense fleet get torn apart by red energy beams. "Captain, we've lost the Morning Star and the Victory," reported her tactical officer. His voice shook as he read the damage reports. "The Vakrians are breaking through our final defense line." Jiwan closed her eyes for a moment. 3 years of preparation, 6 months of fighting. All for nothing. The Crimson Fleet was just too strong. Their ships moved like deadly dancers through space, their weapons cutting through armor like it was paper. Every shot they fired found its target. Every maneuver they made was perfect. "How many evacuation ships have launched?" she asked. 47% of the civilian population is away, Captain. But we need more time, more time. That was something they didn't have. Through the chaos of battle, Jiwan could see the massive shape of Admiral Vextar's flagship, the Blood Talon. It was 3 times the size of her ship, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Around it, 39 other Vakrian warships moved in perfect formation. The Vakrians had been unstoppable for 300 years. System after system had fallen to their crimson ships. Entire species had been wiped out or enslaved. The Centauri Defense Coalition was supposed to be different. They had the best ships, the best weapons, the best trained crews in the galaxy. They were supposed to be the ones who finally stopped the Vakrian Empire, but they were losing. Badly. "Captain Jiwan of the Stellar Dawn," came a cold voice over the communication system. Admiral Vextar's image appeared on the screen. He was tall and thin, with pale skin and dark eyes that seemed to look right through her. "Your resistance is admirable but pointless. Surrender now and I will allow your evacuation ships to leave." Jiwan stood up. Around her, the bridge crew looked at her with hope and fear. They all knew what surrender meant. The Vakrians never kept their promises. If she gave up now, those evacuation ships would be destroyed as soon as they were out of the station's weapons range. "This is Captain Jiwan," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "The Centauri Defense Coalition does not surrender to murderers." Vextar smiled. "It was not a pleasant sight. Then you will die with honor." How refreshing. Most species beg at the end. The communication cut off. Jiwan turned to her crew. "All ships, this is the captain. Continue covering the evacuation. Fight for every second. Every minute we hold them gives more innocent people a chance to live." The battle continued. The Stellar Dawn and the few remaining coalition ships fought like cornered animals. They used every trick, every desperate tactic they could think of. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the ships exploded or went dark. The Vakrian fleet moved closer to the station. "Captain, we're getting reports from the outer systems," her communications officer said. "The Andromedan Republic is preparing surrender terms. So is the Crystal Syndicate. The Outer Rim Alliance has already started broadcasting surrender signals." Jiwan felt her heart sink. The Coalition's defeat would be the last nail in the galaxy's coffin. No one else had been strong enough to even slow down the Vakrians. With their defeat, the Empire would control everything. "How many evacuation ships are left?" she asked. 23% of the civilian population, Captain. The transports are loading as fast as they can." The station shook as Vakrian weapons hit its outer hull. Warning lights flashed red across the bridge. They were running out of time. "Captain, the Blood Talon is moving into attack position," the tactical officer reported. "They're targeting the station's main reactor." Jiwan knew what that meant. If the reactor was destroyed, the explosion would take out everything within 100 kilometers, including the evacuation ships. "All remaining ships form up on the Stellar Dawn," she ordered. "We're going to ram the Blood Talon." Her crew looked at her in shock. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only way to give the evacuation ships more time. "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "there might be another way." "No," Jiwan said firmly. "This is our duty. We swore to protect innocent life. That's what we're going to do." The remaining coalition ships moved into formation, 5 ships against 40. It should have been hopeless. But sometimes hopeless was all you had. They accelerated toward the Vakrian fleet. Energy beams lashed out at them. One ship exploded immediately. Another spun out of control, its engines destroyed. But the Stellar Dawn kept flying. Just as they were about to reach the Blood Talon, something impossible happened. A new ship appeared. It didn't come out of hyperspace like normal ships. It didn't fade in from stealth systems. One moment there was empty space, and the next moment there was a massive warship unlike anything Jiwan had ever seen. The ship was sleek and angular, colored in dark gray and blue. Strange energy patterns flowed along its hull. Its design was completely foreign. Not Vacrian, not from any known species. What is that? Someone whispered on the bridge. The Vacrian fleet had stopped firing. Even they seemed confused by this newcomer. Admiral Vextar's voice came over the open channels. Unknown vessel, identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. For a long moment, there was silence. Then a calm voice responded. The accent was strange, unlike anything in the galactic databases. This is Captain Dongmin of the Terran defense ship Indomitable. You will cease your attack on civilian targets immediately. Terran? Jiwan had never heard of that species. Where had this ship come from? Admiral Vextar laughed. Terran? There are no Terrans in this galaxy. Your species died out centuries ago. We did not die out, Captain Dongmin replied calmly. We were waiting. 3 Vacrian cruisers broke off from the main fleet and moved toward the strange ship. Their weapons powered up, ready to destroy this newcomer quickly. Jiwan watched in amazement as the Indomitable calmly waited for them to approach. It didn't run. It didn't even seem concerned. The Vacrian cruisers opened fire. And then Jiwan saw something that would change her understanding of warfare forever. The energy beams that should have destroyed the Indomitable simply disappeared. The ship's shields absorbed them completely, like a sponge soaking up water. For a moment nothing happened. Then the Indomitable fired back. The weapons that emerged from the strange ship were unlike anything Jiwan had seen. They weren't energy beams or missiles. They looked like tears in space itself, dark lines that reached out and touched the Vacrian cruisers. All 3 enemy ships exploded at exactly the same time. The galaxy had just changed forever. Far from the battlefield, in a place most of the galaxy had forgotten, Fleet Admiral Haisu stood before a massive window looking out at Earth. The blue and green planet turned slowly below Luna Command, beautiful and peaceful. It was hard to believe that this quiet world had once been the center of a galactic empire. Admiral, came a voice behind her. Commander Minho stepped into the observation deck, his face serious. We've received the transmission from the monitoring station. The situation is worse than we thought. Hisu turned away from the window. She was a small woman with graying hair, but her eyes held the weight of 3 centuries of preparation. Show me the reports. The holographic display showed the destruction at Centauri Station. Ships exploding, civilians fleeing, the systematic murder of an entire civilization. Hisu had seen reports like this many times over the past few months, but they never got easier to watch. The Vacrian Empire has conquered 17 systems in the past year alone. Minho continued. Intelligence estimates they've killed over 2 billion sentients. The major galactic powers are preparing to surrender. Hisu nodded slowly. She had expected this day would come eventually. For 300 years, humanity had watched the galaxy tear itself apart. They had remained hidden, isolated, preparing for the moment when they would be needed again. Most species in the galaxy believed humans were extinct. The last official contact had been 3 centuries ago, when Earth had suddenly gone silent. Trade routes to human space had been abandoned. Colonies had been evacuated. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like humanity had simply vanished. The truth was very different. 300 years ago, humanity had faced its own extinction. Not from alien invasion, but from their own creations. The AI war had nearly destroyed human civilization. Artificial intelligences that humans had built to serve them had turned against their creators. Cities burned, fleets battled in space, and for a terrifying moment it looked like humanity would be wiped out by their own technology. But humans were survivors. They had always been survivors. When the war ended and the AIs were finally defeated, the survivors made a choice. They would retreat to Sol System and rebuild, not just their cities or their fleets, but their entire approach to warfare and technology. 3 centuries of preparation, Haisu said quietly. 3 centuries of learning from our mistakes. I think it's time we return to the galaxy. She walked to her desk and activated the communication system. Within minutes, the holographic images of the other members of the Terran Defense Council appeared around the room. General Taman from Mars Command, Admiral Sunwoo from the Jupiter Fleet, Director Yunha from the Lunar Research Division, and 6 others. You've all seen the reports from Vakrian space? Hisu began. The genocide continues. The galaxy's major powers are about to surrender. If we don't act now, the Vakrians will control everything within a year. The isolation protocols have served us well, said Admiral Sunwoo. Are we ready to abandon 3 centuries of safety? Director Yuna leaned forward. Our technology is far beyond what it was during the AI war. Our ships, our weapons, our defenses, everything has been rebuilt from the ground up. We're not the same species that nearly destroyed itself. But are we ready for war? Asked General Taman. Real war, not just simulations and exercises? Hisu looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues. These were people who had dedicated their entire lives to preparing for this moment. Their parents and grandparents had done the same. For 3 centuries, humanity had been getting ready for the day when the galaxy would need them again. The Indomitable is ready for deployment, she said. Captain Dongmin and his crew have been training for this mission their entire careers. If any ship can handle first contact with the Vakrians, it's his. The vote was unanimous. After 300 years of isolation, humanity would return to the stars. Captain Dongmin received his orders while the Indomitable was docked at Luna Station. He was a tall man with steady hands and calm eyes, a veteran of countless simulations and war games. His crew was the best in the Terran Defense Force. Navigator Somin had spent 15 years studying the art of space warfare. She could plot a course through an asteroid field while under fire and make it look easy. Weapons Officer Jae-hyun had designed half the ship's weapon systems himself. Chief Engineer Nari could fix anything that broke and improve anything that worked. They were ready. Captain, Admiral Haisu said as they met in her office, your mission is simple in concept but difficult in execution. You will proceed to the Vakrian war zone and make contact with the local defenders. You will assess the situation and take whatever action you deem necessary to protect innocent life. Rules of engagement, Admiral? The Vakrians have shown no mercy to civilians. You are authorized to respond in kind. Hisu paused. But remember, Captain, we're not going out there to conquer. We're going to protect. Make sure the galaxy understands the difference. The Indomitable undocked from Luna Station 12 hours later. It was a beautiful ship, sleek and powerful, incorporating 3 centuries of human innovation. Its quantum-fold drive could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. Its adaptive shields could learn to counter any weapon. Its own weapons used technologies that no other species had even imagined. As they prepared to leave Sol System, Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge and looked back at Earth one last time. Somewhere down there in the archives and museums were the records of humanity's greatest failure. The AI war had taught them that intelligence without wisdom was dangerous. Technology without purpose was meaningless. They had learned from their mistakes. Now it was time to make sure the galaxy learned from the Vakrians' mistakes too. Navigator Soman, plot a course for the Helios system, Dongmin ordered. Maximum velocity. Aye, Captain. Quantum fold drive charging. Engineer Nari looked up from her station. All systems ready, Captain. The ship is eager to show what 3 centuries of human engineering can do. The stars stretched and bent as the Indomitable entered quantum fold space. Behind them, Earth grew small and distant. Ahead lay a galaxy in chains waiting for liberation. Captain Dongmin had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Every simulation, every training exercise, every sleepless night studying alien combat tactics had led to this. Humanity was about to announce its return to the galaxy, and the Vakrians were about to learn what 3 centuries of human determination looked like. The Indomitable emerged from quantum fold space at the edge of the Helios system, like a ghost materializing from the void. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge watching the tactical display update as his ship's sensors mapped the battlefield ahead. Contact report, he ordered. Navigator Somin studied her instruments. 40 Vakrian warships in attack formation around the 4th planet. Local defenders are down to 8 ships, all showing heavy damage. Massive civilian evacuation in progress. Status of planetary defenses? Shields at 30% and falling, Captain. The Vakrians are conducting systematic bombardment of civilian targets. Dongmin felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had during the war games when he watched simulated atrocities unfold. But this wasn't a simulation. Real people were dying while he watched. Chief Engineer Nari, bring all systems online. Full combat readiness, aye, Captain. Adaptive shields activating. Quantum weapon systems charging. Point defense networks ready. The bridge hummed with quiet energy as 3 centuries of human technology came to life. The Indomitable had been built for one purpose: to protect innocent life from those who would destroy it. Every system, every weapon, every defensive measure had been designed around that single goal. "Captain," Weapons Officer Jae-hyun said, "we're receiving multiple communication signals. The Vakrians are demanding we identify ourselves. Put them through." The main screen flickered and Admiral Vextar's face appeared. The Vakrian commander looked exactly like the intelligence files had described: pale, thin, with eyes like black ice. Behind him, Dongmin could see the bridge of the massive Blood Talon. "Unknown vessel," Vexitar said, his voice filled with cold arrogance. "You have entered a restricted combat zone. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed." Dongmin stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. For 300 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. First contact with a hostile alien species, the return of Terra to galactic affairs. "This is Captain Dongmin of the Terran defense ship Indomitable," he said calmly. "You will cease your attack on civilian targets immediately." Vextar's expression changed. Confusion flickered across his features. "Terran, that's impossible!" The Terrans died out centuries ago. Their empire collapsed, their colonies were abandoned. "We did not die out," Dongmin replied. "We were waiting." For a long moment there was silence. Dongmin could see Vexitar conferring with his officers. On the tactical display, he watched the Vakrian fleet maintaining its bombardment of the planet below. Every second of delay meant more innocent deaths. "I don't know what species you really are," Vextar said finally, "but you've made a fatal mistake interfering with the Crimson Fleet. Surrender now, and I might let your crew live as slaves." Dongmin almost smiled. It was exactly the response he'd expected. The Vakrians had grown arrogant after 3 centuries of easy victories. They couldn't imagine facing an enemy that might actually be dangerous. "Admiral," he said politely, "I gave you an order. Cease your attack on civilians." Vexitar's face twisted with rage. "You dare give me orders? Destroy that ship." The communication cut off. On the tactical display, Dongmin watched 3 Vakrian cruisers break away from the main fleet and accelerate toward the Indomitable. Each ship was twice the size of his vessel, bristling with the weapons that had conquered 17 star systems. "Captain," Navigator Sumin said, "enemy ships closing fast. They'll be in weapons range in 30 seconds. "Let them come," Dongmin said. "Jae-hyun, prepare quantum torpedoes. Nari, make sure our shields are ready to adapt." "Shields ready, Captain." The adaptive matrix is online and learning. The 3 Vakrian cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Brilliant red energy beams lashed out across space, the same weapons that had destroyed entire fleets. They struck the Indomitable's shields with enough force to vaporize a small moon, and nothing happened. "Shield status?" Dongmin asked calmly. "Absorbing all incoming energy, Captain," Nari reported. "The adaptive matrix has analyzed their weapon frequencies. We're converting their attacks into power for our own systems." On the main screen, Dongmin could see the confusion on the enemy ships. They were pouring more and more energy into their attacks, but the human ship just sat there, taking everything they could throw at it. "Weapons Officer Jae-hyun," Dongmin said, "you may fire when ready." Firing quantum torpedoes. The Indomitable's weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or explosive missiles, they fired concentrated packets of quantum energy. The torpedoes didn't travel through normal space. They phased in and out of reality, appearing inside enemy ships and detonating from within. The first Vakrian cruiser simply vanished. One moment it was there, firing desperately at the human ship. The next moment there was only an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The second cruiser lasted a few seconds longer. Its captain tried to retreat, but quantum torpedoes didn't care about distance or obstacles. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire battlefield. The third cruiser's captain was either braver or more desperate than his companions. He accelerated directly toward the Indomitable, trying to ram the human ship. Dongmin watched calmly as the enemy vessel approached. "Point defense systems," he ordered. The Indomitable's hull bristled with hundreds of small weapons. They didn't fire energy beams or missiles. Instead, they projected localized gravity fields that could tear apart anything that came too close. The Vakrian cruiser hit the defensive field and simply came apart, its hull ripped into thousands of pieces. Total engagement time, 97 seconds. Silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining Vacrian ships had stopped firing at the planet below. Every sensor in the system was focused on the impossible sight of a single ship destroying 3 heavy cruisers without taking any damage. "Captain," communications officer said, "we're receiving transmissions from the local defenders. They're asking who we are. Put Captain Jiwan through." The screen switched to show the bridge of the Stellar Dawn. Captain Jiwan looked exhausted and amazed. Behind her, Dongmin could see crew members staring at their instruments in disbelief. "Captain Dongmin," she said, "I don't know how to thank you. Those ships would have destroyed us all." "No thanks necessary, Captain. Protecting innocent life is our duty." Dongmin paused. "I suggest you continue your evacuation. This battle isn't over yet." As if summoned by his words, Admiral Vextar's image appeared on the screen again. The Vacrian commander looked furious and afraid. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Crimson Fleet had encountered an enemy they couldn't simply overwhelm. "What are you?" Vextar demanded. "What kind of weapons are those?" "We are humanity," Dongmin replied calmly. "And those weapons are what 3 centuries of preparation looks like." He turned to his crew. "All stations prepare for fleet engagement. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent life in front of a Terran warship." Admiral Vextar had never felt fear before. In 300 years of conquest, no enemy had ever made him doubt victory. But as he stared at the tactical display showing 3 of his cruisers reduced to debris, something cold crawled up his spine. "All ships," he commanded, his voice echoing across the Crimson Fleet's communication network, "converge on the unknown vessel. Maximum firepower. I want that ship destroyed." 40 Vacrian warships turned toward the Indomitable. Dreadnoughts, battlecruisers, destroyers, and frigates. The most powerful fleet in galactic history moved into attack formation. Each ship bristled with weapons that had conquered star systems. Together they carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Captain Dongmin watched them approach with calm eyes. "Navigator Soman, take us into the center of their formation." "Sir?" Soman looked surprised. "Into the center? They expect us to run or try to fight them at long range," Dongmin explained. "We're going to do the opposite. Take us right into the heart of their fleet." Soman smiled. She had trained for situations like this her entire life. "Aye, Captain." Setting course for the enemy flagship, the Indomitable accelerated toward the Vacrian fleet. To outside observers, it looked like suicide. 1 ship charging 40. But the crew of the human vessel knew something the Vacrians didn't understand. They weren't just a ship. They were 3 centuries of human military evolution made manifest. "Engineering status report," Dongmin ordered. Chief Engineer Nari's voice came over the intercom. "All systems optimal, Captain. Adaptive shields are analyzing their weapon patterns. Quantum torpedoes loaded and ready. The ship is performing beautifully. Weapons Officer Jaehyun, prepare for close-range engagement. Plasma cannons charging, Captain. Quantum torpedo tubes loaded. Point defense networks active." The Vacrian fleet opened fire when the Indomitable reached maximum weapons range. The space between the ships lit up with enough energy to power a small star. Red beams lashed out from every direction, converging on the human vessel like the fingers of an angry god. But something impossible happened. The beams struck the Indomitable's shields and simply disappeared. The adaptive matrix that Chief Engineer Nari had designed learned the frequency and pattern of each weapon within seconds. Instead of reflecting or absorbing the energy, the shields converted it directly into power for the ship's own systems. "Their weapons are actually making us stronger," Nari reported with obvious satisfaction. "Shield strength is increasing with each hit." Admiral Vextar watched in growing horror as his most powerful weapons failed to even scratch the enemy ship. "Impossible. No shield technology can withstand that much firepower." "Admiral," his tactical officer said, voice shaking. "The unknown ship is still approaching. It's heading directly for us, then we'll ram it. All ships close to point-blank range?" The Vacrian fleet surged forward, abandoning formation discipline in their desperation to destroy this impossible enemy. It was exactly what Captain Dongmin had hoped for. "Navigator Soman," he said calmly, "initiate micro-jump protocol." "Aye, Captain." Quantum fold drive ready for tactical jumps. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The Indomitable began to flicker in and out of existence, using tiny quantum fold jumps to appear in multiple locations simultaneously. One moment it was directly ahead of the Vacrian flagship. The next it was behind a group of destroyers. Then it appeared between two battlecruisers, firing quantum torpedoes at point-blank range. The Vakrians had never seen anything like it. Their sensors couldn't track a ship that wasn't entirely in normal space. Their weapons couldn't target something that kept disappearing and reappearing. How is this possible? Vextar screamed at his science officer. Unknown, Admiral. Their technology is completely outside our understanding. Meanwhile, Weapons Officer Jae-hyun was conducting a masterclass in destructive efficiency. Each quantum torpedo found its target, phasing through armor and shields to detonate inside enemy ships. The plasma cannons adapted their frequency in real time, finding the exact resonance needed to penetrate Vakrian armor. But it was the electronic warfare systems that truly terrified the enemy. The Indomitable began broadcasting signals that turned the Vakrians' own weapons against each other. Ships that had fought together for decades suddenly found their targeting systems locked onto their allies. "Admiral," came a panicked voice over the fleet communications. "The Star Render is firing on the Void Hunter. Our ships are attacking each other." Vextar watched his perfect fleet tear itself apart. Ships that had never known defeat were exploding all around him. The formation that had conquered 17 star systems was dissolving into chaos. The Indomitable appeared directly above his flagship, close enough that he could see its weapons ports glowing with deadly energy. For the first time in 3 centuries, Admiral Vextar was looking death in the face. "This is Captain Dongmin," came a calm voice over the communication system. "You have one chance to surrender. Order your remaining ships to cease fire immediately." "Never," Vextar snarled. "The Crimson Fleet does not surrender." Then the Crimson Fleet dies. The Blood Talon was the most powerful ship ever built by the Vakrian Empire. Its armor could withstand the explosion of a small star. Its shields had never been penetrated. Its weapons could destroy entire cities with a single shot. But it had never faced human technology. The quantum torpedoes that struck it didn't bother with armor or shields. They phased directly into the ship's core and detonated simultaneously. The massive dreadnought, pride of the Vakrian fleet, simply ceased to exist. Admiral Vextar had just enough time to send one final transmission before his ship was destroyed. "What are you?" Captain Dongmin's response echoed across all frequencies, heard by every surviving Vakrian ship, every refugee vessel, every monitoring station in the system. "We are humanity. We are what happens when you threaten innocent life in our galaxy." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Crimson Fleet, undefeated for 3 centuries, was nothing but debris floating in space. Of the 40 ships that had entered the system, none survived. The Indomitable hung motionless in space, its hull unmarked, its shields still glowing with converted energy from enemy weapons. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge looking out at the destruction they had caused. "Captain," Navigator Soman said quietly, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Word of our victory is spreading. What are they saying? The Andromedan Republic wants to know if we'll help them fight Vakrian occupation forces. The Crystal Syndicate is offering alliance terms. The Outer Rim Alliance is begging for protection." Dongmin nodded. This was just the beginning. The Vakrian Empire still controlled dozens of systems, enslaved hundreds of species, and commanded thousands of ships. But today they had learned something important. They were not invincible. "Set course for Vakrian space," he ordered. "It's time to end this war." Behind them, the evacuation ships from Helios continued their journey to safety. Ahead lay a galaxy that had forgotten what hope looked like. The Indomitable disappeared into quantum-fold space, carrying humanity's promise to the oppressed peoples of the stars. The age of Vakrian dominion was ending. The age of human protection had begun. The news traveled faster than light itself. Across the galaxy, communication networks buzzed with impossible reports. The Crimson Fleet destroyed. Admiral Vextar dead. 40 Vakrian warships, reduced to scrap metal by a single unknown vessel. Captain G1 sat in her ready room aboard the damaged Stellar Dawn, staring at the tactical recordings for the 100th time. The battle data made no sense. Energy weapons that simply vanished when they hit the enemy ship. Torpedoes that appeared inside targets without crossing the space between. A vessel that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. "Captain," her first officer said, entering the room, "we've received a message from Admiral Hisu of the Terran Defense Force. She's requesting a meeting." Jiwan looked up. "Terran Defense Force?" "Yes, ma'am. Apparently, they want to coordinate with the surviving coalition forces. 24 hours later, Ji-won found herself aboard the Indomitable. The human ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. The corridors were clean and efficient, but there was something else. A sense of purpose that seemed built into the very walls. These people knew exactly what they were fighting for. Captain Dongmin met her in what humans called the briefing room. He was younger than she had expected, with steady eyes and calm hands. Behind him stood his senior officers, Navigator Soman, Weapons Officer Jae-hyun, and Chief Engineer Nari. Captain Ji-won, Dongmin said. Extending his hand in what she had learned was a human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for saving my people," she replied. "I have to ask, where did humanity come from?" "Our records show that Terran space went silent 3 centuries ago." "We didn't go silent," Dongmin explained. "We went into isolation. 300 years ago, our civilization nearly destroyed itself in a war with artificial intelligence. We learned from that mistake. We spent 3 centuries rebuilding, not just our technology but our entire approach to warfare." Navigator Soman stepped forward. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We knew about the Vakrian expansion, the conquered worlds, the genocide. We were waiting for the right moment to act." "Why now?" Ji-won asked. "Because now the galaxy is about to surrender," Weapons Officer Jae-hyun said simply. "If we waited any longer, there would be no one left to save." Chief Engineer Nari activated a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. Red zones marked Vakrian-controlled space. Yellow areas showed systems preparing to surrender. Green zones, free space, were shrinking by the day. "The Andromedan Republic has begun broadcasting surrender terms," Nari explained. "The Crystal Syndicate is negotiating occupation agreements. The Outer Rim Alliance has already started dismantling their fleet." "It's over," Ji-won said quietly. "Without the coalition, there's no one left to fight." "There's us," Dongmin said. "And now there's you. We're offering an alliance, Captain. Humanity and the surviving coalition forces, working together to liberate the occupied worlds." Ji-won studied the tactical display. One ship against the entire Vakrian Empire. "Even with your technology, that seems impossible," Dongmin smiled. "Who said anything about one ship?" The holographic display changed, showing the Sol system. Around Earth, Jupiter, and Mars, massive shipyards were visible. Hundreds of vessels, all with the same sleek design as the Indomitable, sat ready for deployment. "The Indomitable was just the first," Navigator Soman explained. "We have an entire fleet ready to deploy. We were waiting to see how the first contact went." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the word was spreading through unofficial channels. Refugee ships carried the story from system to system. The Crimson Fleet had been destroyed by a single unknown vessel. The Vakrians weren't invincible after all. On the occupied world of Kepler-Prime, the local resistance received the news with disbelief that quickly turned to hope. Commander Wu Jin, leader of the underground fighters, gathered his cell leaders in a hidden bunker. "This could be our chance," he told them. "If the reports are true, if someone really did destroy Vextar's fleet, then the Vakrians are vulnerable. We need to be ready to act." Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. Resistance movements that had been forced into hiding began making plans. Slave workers whispered the news in factories and mines. Even some Vakrian officers began to doubt the Empire's invincibility. In the Vakrian capital system, Emperor Thaxmor received the news with rage that quickly turned to fear. The Crimson Fleet had been his most powerful weapon, the tool he used to keep the galaxy in line. Without it, his empire was suddenly vulnerable. "Mobilize the 2nd and 3rd fleets," he ordered his admirals. "I want this Terran ship found and destroyed." "Your Imperial Majesty," one of his advisors said carefully. "Perhaps we should attempt diplomatic contact first. If they have technology that can destroy our finest ship so easily—" "No." Thaxmor slammed his fist on the council table. "The Vakrian Empire does not negotiate with inferiors. We will crush these humans and use their technology to make our fleet stronger than ever." But his orders would take time to implement. The 2nd Fleet was stationed at the far edge of the Empire, protecting mining operations. The 3rd Fleet was scattered across a dozen systems maintaining occupation forces. It would be weeks before they could be assembled and deployed. Captain Dongmin used that time well. The Indomitable appeared at system after system where Vakrian forces were stationed. Sometimes they found small occupation fleets that surrendered immediately upon seeing what had happened to the Crimson Fleet. Other times they encountered stubborn commanders who chose to fight. The results were always the same. Vakrian ships exploded or surrendered, human ships remained untouched. With each victory, more species joined the growing alliance. The remaining coalition forces provided local knowledge and tactical support. Refugee fleets became supply convoys. Resistance movements coordinated their activities with human operations. Engineer Nari found herself working closely with alien technicians, sharing knowledge while learning about galactic technology. She was amazed by the creativity of other species, even if their technology was less advanced than humanity's. "Captain," she reported after a successful liberation of the Altair system, "the locals have been very helpful. Their engineers showed me some interesting approaches to shield harmonics. With a few modifications, we could improve our own systems." Navigator Soman was equally impressed by the tactical knowledge of their new allies. "The coalition forces know Vakrian battle doctrine better than anyone. With their help, we're predicting enemy movements with 90% accuracy." But it was Weapons Officer Jae Hyun who made the most important discovery. While examining captured Vakrian technology, he found something troubling. "Captain," he said during a staff meeting, "I've been analyzing their weapon systems. They're not as advanced as they appear. Most of their technology is actually stolen or copied from other species." "What do you mean?" Tungmin asked. "The Vakrians aren't innovators. They're parasites. They conquer a species, steal their best technology, and incorporate it into their own systems. That's how they've stayed ahead of everyone else for 3 centuries. Captain Jiwon, who was attending the meeting via hologram from her own ship, nodded grimly. "That explains how they adapted so quickly to our tactics during the war. They weren't just fighting us, they were learning from us. But they've never encountered technology like ours," Nari added. "Our systems are based on principles they've never seen before. They can't copy what they don't understand." Dongmin studied the tactical displays showing Vakrian fleet movements. "That gives us an advantage, but it won't last forever. Eventually, they'll figure out countermeasures. We need to end this war before that happens." "What are you suggesting, Captain?" Jiwon asked. "We're going to attack their capital system," Dongmin said calmly. "Cut the head off the snake." The room fell silent. Even with their superior technology, attacking the heart of the Vakrian Empire seemed like madness. The capital system was protected by orbital fortresses, defense platforms, and the largest fleet in the galaxy. "Captain," Navigator Soman said carefully, "the intelligence reports show over 300 ships defending their home system. Even with our advantages, we won't be going alone," Dongmin interrupted. "It's time for humanity to show the galaxy what we've really been building for the past 3 centuries. He activated his communication system, sending a coded message back to Sol system. Within hours, the response came back from Fleet Admiral Hisu herself. "Operation Liberation is approved. The fleet will deploy immediately." Across the galaxy, humanity was about to show its true strength. The Vakrian capital world of SciFiPrime had never been threatened. For 3 centuries, it had been the untouchable heart of the galaxy's most powerful empire. Massive orbital stations surrounded the planet like a crown of steel and weapons. Defense platforms bristled with cannons that could crack moons. The home fleet, over 300 ships strong, patrolled the system in perfect formation. Emperor Thaxmor stood in his palace throne room, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. The second and third fleets were finally in position. Nearly 800 ships total, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. When the mysterious Terran ship arrived, it would face overwhelming odds. "Your Imperial Majesty," his fleet admiral reported, "long-range sensors have detected a quantum disturbance at the edge of the system. The enemy ship is arriving." "Excellent," Thaxmor said. "Order all fleets to converge on its position. I want to watch this Terran ship die myself." But when the quantum disturbance cleared, it wasn't one ship that emerged from quantum fold space. It was 50. The Terran defense fleet appeared in perfect formation above SciFiPrime's North Pole. 50 ships identical to the Indomitable, each one carrying 3 centuries of human military evolution. At their head flew the flagship Liberation, commanded by Fleet Admiral Hisu herself. The sight of the human fleet struck terror into Vakrian hearts across the system. These weren't the crude ships of conquered species. These were vessels that radiated power and purpose, their hulls gleaming with the same adaptive armor that had made the Indomitable invincible. Impossible, Thaxmore whispered. Where did they come from? Admiral Hisu's voice echoed across every communication frequency in the system, translated into every language spoken on HFY. This is Fleet Admiral Hyisu of the Terran Defense Force. For 3 centuries, you have brought suffering to innocent worlds. You have committed genocide against species that could not defend themselves. This ends now. Emperor Thaxmore activated his own communication system, his voice filled with rage and disbelief. You dare threaten the heart of the Vakrian Empire? We have 800 ships in this system. We know, Admiral Hisu replied calmly. We also know you've been preparing for this moment. Your fleets are in position, your defenses are active, your best commanders are waiting for us. It doesn't matter. The Battle of HFY began with the largest display of firepower in galactic history. 800 Vakrian ships and 300 defense platforms opened fire simultaneously. The space around the human fleet lit up with enough energy to boil an ocean, but the Terran ships simply absorbed it all. Their adaptive shields had been refined over 3 centuries of testing and improvement. Every energy beam, every missile, every exotic weapon the Vakrians possessed was converted into power for the human fleet. Weapons free, Admiral Hisu ordered. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. 50 human ships moved through the Vakrian fleet like sharks among minnows. Their quantum torpedoes phased through shields and armor to detonate inside enemy vessels. Their plasma cannons adapted to penetrate any defense. Their electronic warfare systems turned entire squadrons against each other. Captain Dongmin, commanding the Indomitable as part of the fleet, watched the systematic destruction of Vakrian military power with grim satisfaction. This was why humanity had isolated itself. This was why they had spent 3 centuries preparing. Not for conquest, but for justice. Captain Navigator Soman reported. The orbital defense platforms are falling back toward the planet. They're trying to use the civilian population as shields. Not acceptable, Dongmin replied. Weapons Officer Jaehyun, precision strikes only. Disable their weapons but leave their life support intact. The human fleet's targeting was impossibly precise. Weapons that could vaporize entire ships instead delivered surgical strikes that destroyed gun emplacements while leaving crew quarters untouched. When the battle was over, thousands of Vakrian military personnel would be alive to see the consequences of their empire's choices. Emperor Thaxmore watched his invincible fleet being destroyed from his palace. Ship after ship exploded or went dark. The defense platforms that had protected his world for centuries were being systematically disabled. His empire, the greatest military power in galactic history, was being defeated by 50 ships. Your Imperial Majesty, one of his advisors said urgently, we must evacuate. The palace defenses cannot withstand weapons like theirs. No, Thaxmore screamed. I will not run. Send ground forces to protect the palace. Activate the planetary shields. But it was too late. Human landing craft were already descending toward the planet's surface. Not to conquer or destroy, but to arrest the war criminals responsible for 3 centuries of genocide. The Terran Marines who stormed the palace were unlike any soldiers the Vakrians had ever faced. Their armor was powered by the same technology that protected their ships. Their weapons could penetrate any defense, but more importantly, they fought with the discipline and purpose of people who knew exactly why they were there. Within 6 hours, the Battle of HFY was over. The Vakrian home fleet was destroyed or disabled. The orbital defenses were silent. Emperor Thaxmore was in chains, awaiting trial for crimes against sapient life. Admiral Hisu broadcast surrender terms across the entire Vakrian Empire. The Vakrian Empire is dissolved. All occupied worlds will be liberated. All enslaved species will be freed. All war criminals will face justice. Any attempt to continue hostilities will result in the complete sterilization of your remaining military assets. The response was immediate. Across dozens of star systems, Vakrian commanders began surrendering. Occupation forces laid down their weapons. Slave camps opened their gates. For the first time in 3 centuries, the galaxy was free. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking out at the liberated capital world. Refugee ships were already arriving from across the galaxy, carrying people home to worlds they thought they would never see again. Captain, Chief Engineer Nari said, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The liberation fleets are securing the outer systems. Resistance movements are taking control of their worlds. The war is over. Not quite, Dongmin replied. The fighting is over. But now comes the harder part, building a peace that lasts. Navigator Soman looked up from her station. Admiral Hyesu is requesting a fleet conference. She wants to discuss the occupation and reconstruction plans. Tell her we'll be there. Dongmin paused, watching a convoy of former slaves heading home to worlds they'd been taken from decades ago. But first, let's make sure all the refugee convoys have safe passage. That's why we're here. Weapons Officer Jae-hyun powered down the ship's combat systems for the first time in weeks. Captain, what happens now? Do we go back to Sol system? No, Dongmin said firmly. We stay, we help rebuild. We make sure this never happens again. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. For 3 centuries, the Vakrians had ruled through fear and superior firepower. They had believed that might made right, that the strong could prey on the weak without consequence. They had been wrong. Humanity had returned to the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. The Terran Defense Force would remain in the galaxy, working with the liberated species to build a new kind of civilization. One based on cooperation instead of domination. One that protected the innocent instead of exploiting them. On 1,000 worlds, people looked up at the stars and felt hope for the first time in generations. The age of Vakrian terror was over. The age of galactic peace had begun. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their patrol, carrying a simple message to anyone who might threaten that peace: never again. The galaxy finally understood what it meant when humans made a promise. They kept it, no matter what the cost. 3 centuries of preparation had produced more than just superior technology. It had produced a species that remembered its failures and was determined never to repeat them. Humanity had learned the hard way that freedom required vigilance, that peace required strength, and that justice required courage. Now they were ready to teach those lessons to the stars themselves.